I'm not a die-hard Wonder Woman fan, but I can appreciate the Greek goddess made flesh / naive fish out of water character. So it was with great disappointment that I watched the second silver screen installment of Wonder Woman. The story was lazy, the dialogue was terrible, and the concept was just baffling. Why was this story set in the 1980s? Why was a crystal wishing dildo chosen as the central MacGuffin for the plot? Why did Wonder Woman have wings? Why was Cheetah picked as the main villain? Didn't anybody stop and ask, what is the point of this story? This narrative is so off-brand from the Wonder Woman we saw in the first movie. I remember reading somewhere that Diana, along with Superman and Batman, made up the DC Holy Trinity. The archetype for each being: Wonder Woman is the soldier, Superman is the firefighter, and Batman is the detective. In keeping with those archetypes, a Wonder Woman standalone movie should always involve a major war in some way. Not to mention her Greek god origin, that is a major pattern woven into the tapestry of her character. The Greek gods and their schemes should always intrude into any solo outing that Diana has. Consider all standalone Batman movies. They always occur in Gotham City. The Spider-Man movies, without fail, are monogamously set in New York. I'm not saying character and setting must always be consistent, but when superheroes appear in ensemble movies together, it becomes more important for their solo outings to have a unique personality and feel. If they don't, then every story becomes generic and forgettable. If we look a bit deeper at Batman, his stories, the setting, and his villains, they all have that signature Batman aesthetic. The first solo Wonder Woman film on the big screen gave us the basic blueprint for what the cinematic Wonder Woman is. It began on Themyscira and then involved Diana in World War I. Now, call me simplistic, but would setting Wonder Woman 2 in World War II really be so bad? Marvel fans might jump in here and say that Captain America already planted his flag in this era, and doing the same thing for Diana might invite some unfavorable comparisons. Let's face it, there is going to be some overlap with the settings and eras from DC to Marvel. Aquaman came out first, but that doesn't mean Namor should just sit out the next 10 years. In the hands of a good writer, some new angle of the Second World War could be fleshed out, or at the very least, it would be the jump-off point for the next story. I can think of a few ways to extrapolate a narrative set in the 1940s, so let's move on to another thread that I think we should pull. The first movie established that Diana is naive, and by the movie's end, we don't see much character growth or maturity. We haven't seen her really grow up experientially. Her puppy love for Steve Trevor was cut short, in a very Steve Rogers sort of way. A second movie should be a coming-of-age story for Diana, where her beliefs and convictions are challenged. The first story centered on her being a fish out of water, so a loss of innocence to a degree for Diana would seem to be the most logical step for her character. I like Chris Pine as an actor, but his return as Steve Trevor in the sequel made zero narrative sense, so in my story exploration, he will not be making a return. Anyways, on to the main event. Sit back and enjoy as I correct the terrible wrong that was Wonder Woman 1984. Let's go. Our opening shot has an Allied soldier looking through the periscope of a tank. The crosshairs are lined up with the silhouette of a Nazi tank. Suddenly, the Allied tank is hoisted into the air and sent flying back into the Allied forces battle line. As the tank collides with an Allied gun platform, the explosion reveals the shadowy outline of a single man. Another Allied tank opens fire at the lone soldier. Heavy shells make impact, kicking up smoke and dust. When the shelling is done, the lone soldier remains standing with no damage. The scene closes out with the soldier smashing more Allied tanks as an Allied scout runs away. The next shot shows an airfield somewhere in the United States. A fighter plane lands, and the pilot gets out. Once the pilot removes their helmet, we can see that it is Diana. After Steve died, she went to America after the war. She decided to honor Steve's memory by becoming a pilot. With her strength and durability, she is the perfect person to test experimental aircraft. I would include a shot of Diana looking at a picture of Steve and muttering something to the effect of, "If only she could have flown that plane herself during the war, Steve would still be alive." A voice calling her name draws her attention away from her musing. The commander of the airbase briskly walks toward Diana. He draws close to Diana and asks her how the new jet engine test aircraft is performing. She tells him that, as is, the power of the thrust might be unwieldy for mortal man. Once that obstacle is overcome, the plane will be an excellent addition to the Air Force. The Major takes advantage of this conversational segue and reveals why he is really here. He reads her a short communiqué from the European front. It is a report of a Nazi soldier that can throw tanks and shrug off bullets and heavy artillery. The Allies are losing ground quickly. President Roosevelt has not given the order to join the war in Europe, but this new development cannot go unanswered. Officially, the president remains neutral. Off the record, the military has been granted permission to send an exploratory mission to Europe to assess the situation. I know Europe only has unhappy memories for you from the last war, but if this report is true, then only you are strong enough to face this threat. The Major adds, "This isn't just about lines on a map. Freedom itself is under attack. What these Nazis are doing is pure evil, and they must be stopped." Reluctantly, Diana agrees, and she collects her equipment. The Major told her that the United States cannot be implicated in any way during her operation. She remembers her mother telling her the story of Zeus hiding Themyscira from the eyes of man. After loading her equipment onto the experimental jet, she places her hands on the fuselage and prays. "Gods of Olympus, I am Diana of Themyscira. I ask that you hide this plane from the eyes of mortal men." After a brief moment, the metal of the plane begins to shimmer and then becomes invisible. Diana thanks the gods and then enters the plane and prepares for takeoff. Back on the European front, we see the indestructible Nazi soldier enter the ruins of the Parthenon in Greece. A Nazi general greets him there. "Guten Tag, Baron Blitzkrieg. Your efforts for the Third Reich have accelerated the Führer's plans immensely. You are the perfect example of the master race." The Nazi general continues, "The gods are truly with us. Tell me, do you remember anything from before your accident?" The Baron replies, "No, I do not." The general continues, unconcerned, "You are commanded to assist the attack on France." The Baron turns on his heel and departs. Diana is in the skies above France. She looks down and remembers her time with Steve and the others. She finds a secluded area and lands the plane in the countryside. She finds some civilian clothes and puts them on over her armor. She decides that for now her sword and shield should remain with the plane until she can confirm the truth about this Superman. In the distance, shells begin to drop, and the sound of gunfire repeats across the countryside. Diana races toward the conflict. She reaches the Allied line and asks to speak to the commander in charge. Just then, a French tank plummets out of the sky toward her position. Without hesitation, she leaps into the air and catches the tank and eases it to the ground after she lands. In the distance, the Baron strides through the gunfire. Diana goes out to meet him and attempts to halt his advance. She begins to speak to him with her hand outstretched, but the Baron balls up his fist and lunges at her. Diana crosses her wrists to block the strike. The heavy blow slams into Diana. Her feet dig deep furrows into the ground as her body is thrust backwards. With diplomacy off the table for now, she charges into the Baron and delivers a vicious knee to his chest. The Baron is now sent backwards, making ruts of his own. The two warriors fight amidst the tanks and gunfire, each hit sending shockwaves that echo across the war zone. Diana wraps her lasso around the Baron's neck. The lasso begins to glow, and the Baron drops to his knees looking confused. Seeing no more fight in the Baron, Diana asks him to tell her who he is. The man wears a blank expression for a time, then his eyes lighten up, and he says, "I am Hercules." Diana has heard the tales attached to this name, but that man died many, many centuries ago. Seeing the look of doubt on her face, Hercules tells her that he also is a child of Zeus. He died fighting the Lernaean Hydra. The beast had poisoned him during their battle. After he had severed and burned the 9th head, the poison overtook him. He was tormented in Hades for a time beyond remembering. He cried out to Zeus night and day until finally the god took pity on him and commanded him to complete his labors, or else his soul would be cast into oblivion. He was reborn in this place and time, with no memory of his past, until the magic of Diana's lasso broke his enchanted stupor. Hercules continued, "Diana, let's leave this war behind. I must complete my labors, or else I will suffer the wrath of the gods. Will you come with me?" As a sidebar, in legend, Hercules had 12 labors to complete in order to become immortal. They mostly consisted of killing someone or something, but for the sake of the story, I would leave only a few labors left undone. Over the course of their montage, this power couple would become infatuated with each other. Each has lost loved ones over the span of years. Their superpowers bring them a unique attraction to each other. They are both relics of an ancient world relegated to history. Unfortunately, the other shoe must drop, and here it is. After defeating the last trial, Hercules asks about Diana's homeland. She tells him that it is forbidden for men to visit Themyscira. Hercules pulls his trump card and says that he wants to ask for her mother's blessing. Diana is deeply touched by the honorable gesture and decides to push past her misgivings. The two board her jet and fly to Themyscira. When they arrive, Diana is greeted warmly by her sisters, but when Hercules emerges from the plane, the reception becomes frosty. The Amazons place chains onto Hercules, and then the couple is led to the throne room to answer to Queen Hippolyta for this trespass. The queen demands to know why Diana has brought this man to their shores. Diana says that she loves this man, and that he comes to ask for her blessing. The queen asks Diana why she has again become infatuated with another mortal man. Diana says that he is no ordinary man. that he has the strength of the gods. Hippolyta narrows her eyes and scrutinizes the man before her with renewed suspicion. Then she asks, "Who are you?" Hercules drops to one knee and bows his head. This sudden act of obeisance confuses the queen and her guards for a split second, but that's all the time he needed. Hercules snaps the chains as though they were made of straw. He springs forward like a cat and tears off the belt from around the queen's waist, violently throwing her back against the throne. With one deft movement, he fastens her belt around himself. With his final labor completed, a bolt of lightning arcs down from the sky and strikes Hercules. The gods had made Hercules immortal. The Amazons attack. Spears and arrows impale the god, but none of his golden blood falls to the ground. He plucks the barbs from his body and throws them back at the Amazons with terrible power and accuracy, skewering the warrior women, killing some, and fatally wounding the rest. Diana makes a half-hearted attempt to stop him, but he slaps her hard, and she falls to the ground. Hercules strides toward the double doors of the throne room when Diana's lasso wraps around his wrist. She asks him if all of this, if their love, was a lie. With a face like unchanging stone, Hercules looks down at her and says, "It was nothing. Just the means to an end." With a violent twist, Hercules pulls the lasso from Diana's hands and leaves the throne room. Diana remains on the floor, heartbroken. Outside, Hercules faces off against more Amazons. He is stronger than they are, yet they bravely engage him regardless of their losses. Soon the battlefield is quiet. The moans of the injured women are growing softer as their strength and blood drains into the earth. Hercules makes his way to the center of the carnage and yells with a loud voice, "Pegasus!" The trumpet-like sound of a horse whinnying resounds from the sky. A winged horse appears and touches down in front of Hercules. For a brief moment, a look of regret crosses his face. He looks down at the lasso, still in his hand. Opening his hand, the lasso drops to the ground. Hercules sits on the back of the flying horse. He simply says one word, "Olympus," and Pegasus launches into the air. Diana runs out of the throne room, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Come back, Hercules. Don't leave me." Her words trail off as her voice becomes husky from crying. Hippolyta walks up to Diana and embraces her daughter. The camera pans around, showing the destruction. The queen considers the chains broken so easily by this outsider. Bitterly, the queen says to Diana, "Now you understand. This is the pain that man's world brings." Diana looks at her mother and says, "No, Hercules came from our world, our gods, our ways. I have lived in mortal man's world. Most are good and noble, ready to sacrifice themselves for others." At this, Diana takes out the photo of Steve Trevor. Everyone has weakness, in one way or another. The camera pulls back, and the credits roll. I was toying with the idea of adding an end credit scene. The goddess Hera appears to Hippolyta and says, "That boy has been a thorn in my side since the day he was born. He made a fool of you and your daughter. He killed your sisters and broke your peace. I say we settle the score." So how does that story treatment sit with everyone? Let me know down below. Until next time.